Hey everyone, it's Yvonne here with Secure Yourself Consulting, where our mission is to consult, educate, and provide individuals tools to increase and leverage financial literacy to not only save money, but to build wealth. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Secure Yourself Co. And we are back with episode 2. And we're going to be talking about is your total health in a virtuous or vicious cycle? And again, I'm bringing Justin Banks, a mental health advocate, along to have these candid conversations on how we can pretty much bridge the gap between mental health and that whole mind, body, and money connection. So,
Absolutely.
the first thing that I wanted to do was kick it off with a statement. You cannot achieve what you fail to acknowledge
Mhm.
through avoidance. Um, and I think that is really big when we're talking about is your total health in a virtuous or vicious cycle? Because the first step, I believe, is acknowledging, you
Mhm.
know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, any type of behaviors or coping or anything that you're engaging with. So when we're thinking about that total health cycle, that's something that we need to be aware. So we have to acknowledge it and not avoid it.
Mhm.
Because sometimes some things that we need to change, it will be uncomfortable. So I definitely kind of want to, utilize your subject area of expertise, Justin, on that particular statement as we kind of, think about some of those stress triggers as well, right? So
Absolutely.
when we're thinking about four categories of like health, financial, emotional, and family, like what are, especially with the first area, kind of like that whole anxiety and how anxiety brings avoidance and how we can really break that down so that
Mhm.
we can turn avoidance to acknowledgement.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's tough right there. Like when it comes to mental health, number one, I want to try to tell people that, anxiety is common for anybody. But when it becomes very consistent, if you're sad all the time, if you're isolating yourself all the time, if you start doing things that we might do every now and then consistently and on a daily basis, that's when you know that you're at a point of being mentally unstable. And that's when you know you need to start trying to find some help for yourself. So when it comes to that vicious cycle, that's when it begins. So if I'm at a point where I have, that worrying or something like that, you have to figure out why exactly am I worrying? Am I generally scared about something? And what am I scared about? So it's actually asking those questions to understand your real reality because your mind is going to play tricks on you. So you might be worried about something, and then in your head, you start thinking about things that might happen in the future. Hasn't happened yet, but you
False
think it might,
scenarios.
all scenarios. And you will be scared about something that hasn't even happened. And that will scare you and that will stop you from making any action in the time that you're in now. So when you
Mm-hmm.
actually have that awareness of figuring out or a mindfulness of, okay, where am I at right now? What exactly am I scared of? And you might realize that it's just, I'm afraid to take this step because I don't know anyone else that's done it. I'm afraid to do something new. I'm afraid to really grow and take those steps of healing. And when you face that, you kind of realize, okay, that's my real situation. Then you try to learn the solutions to kind of take those steps forward to better yourself. And that happens in all of those cycles.
Yeah, definitely. That is a good point because I think a lot of times when we think about acknowledging and trying to make those changes, it really starts with the little steps
Mm-hmm. Little steps.
because it's a continuous journey to ensure that you're having a virtuous total health cycle. First category or grouping, which is
Mm-hmm.
health, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like that's that physical health. And a lot of times I don't think people actually correlate how much your physical health subconsciously or works with your mental health,
Mm-hmm.
which then opens or, has that closed moment when it comes to money.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if we think about health in our communities as well, we are already high risk for certain, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And
Yes.
then it's just like being mindful of the things that we consume,
Mm-hmm.
being mindful of the things that we have access to. Because
Yes.
also in some urban areas, there are food deserts.
Yes.
So there's a reason why we don't have, there is a legitimate reason why we do not have access to, fresh produce. And that's an acknowledgement moment right there.
Yes.
It's like, hey, we already know, like, we don't have access to this. So maybe it would be in my best interest to go to the Eastern Market on Saturday, combat some of those stigmas that are placed on our communities as a whole, because at the end of the day, we're controlling that narrative. So whether we're falling in line with the narrative or the stigmas that people place among our communities, or whether we're, being an active agent to change that, I think that's one thing that it's like, hey, we have to acknowledge that even in your family, like maybe high blood pressure does run in your family. Why is that? Is it that we are is it that we worry a lot?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that we just naturally, have high stress tolerance? And to me, I think that family health or that family history is very important, especially when you're trying to control that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
once you're able to acknowledge, like, hey, I may not have diabetes, but it runs in my family. And then you can look at the things that you guys are having, for Labor Day, Memorial Day, Thanksgiving, and be like, most of this stuff we should not be cooking with. Like, this was stuff that they were doing a long time ago for
Right.
survival that
Right.
we don't have to do now.
Right. Facts.
Okay.
What's so good about that is just I kind of want to tell people like how we always talk about how the mind and body is so connected, and then how it connects to finance. And if you're somebody with an anxious mind and you worry a lot, this is how quick like this transition can go. So say I am scared about a job interview or something like that. I get worried, and sometimes the more worried you get, your body starts having symptoms, right? You might get a little nervous. You might have some aches or some pains because your body is tensing up. And someone who is scared then starts worrying about their physical. And it's like, why am I feeling this? They forgot all about the job interview. Now it's like, okay, why am I feeling this now? Could I have this? And you make that mistake of looking up on Google for any type of symptom that you may have, and they give you the worst possible outcomes, right?
What
Like
is it? WebMD?
yes, oh my
The
God.
worst thing that you can Google.
You can look up shoulder tension and it's like cancer. Like that's literally how bad it can get. And then you start worrying about, okay, what if I have this? Then you go down this tunnel of all these different fears. And then you're like, I can't pay for this. I can't pay for treatment if I have this, this, and that. And all of that stems from you being nervous about a job interview. So that's how big that these thoughts can happen. So it's like you have to face a whole bunch of different bears coming at you. That's that fight or flight. And really, all it was just you're nervous about an interview. So how can you handle that? When you talk about awareness, how can you handle that? How can I prepare myself to be ready for the interview? Whether it's dressing nice, whether it's making sure you got all your facts together, going over questions, and that can take away so much stress. Just like how you talked about if having issues with physical health, like you were saying, if I have high blood pressure in my family, maybe I can just take a walk. Maybe I can do something that just takes me just a step in this direction, little step towards healthiness. You just take little steps like that. And once you do those things in a variety of different platforms, that's when we want to turn, little actions into lifestyles. And the more you do that, you'll see that stress really starts to go away. And the things that you were so worried about, that's just a blip on your radar now because you know how to handle it. And that's what we're trying to do. We just want you stable. Just be stable.
Stable.
Yeah.
I think stable is a great word, and normalize stableness.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's not that you always have to be on one extreme or the other extreme, but just be balanced. That whole idea of balance and what that looks like to you is so imperative. And I like how you did bring in that financial aspects and how that ties into emotional and health,
Mm-hmm.
and even when we were talking about like that whole family scenario,
Yes.
bringing in that family history, because one thing that I also think from a financial perspective is, there's several studies that have, shown that, hey, the reason why there's a gap is one due to the exposure and the experience. But when we're talking about controlling that narrative, it's like, hey, if I know that my parents did the best that they possibly could for me, from an exposure and experience standpoint financially, it will be within my best interest to do better.
Right.
Because that's one thing my family has always like told us as youth is like every generation gets better and better.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that we did financially, you know, maybe we had a late start because we didn't know about this stuff. But now that we know about it, we're relaying this information so that you can go ahead and get a head start.
Right.
And then that way that cycle constantly continues because now it's information that I know that I put in place for my nieces and my nephews.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so it's just really that exposure. And when you're talking about that whole, you know, vicious or virtual cycle, I mean, and we're talking about balance, just to reel it back real quick, we could give an example on how it can be topsy-turvy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go from a vicious cycle, let's just say, because it starts off with financial,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the baseline. Finances is pretty much the drive to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say, you know, you have acknowledged that you are getting underpaid. So now you need to put yourself in a position to get paid at the level that you need to be at or above, you know, negotiate if that's something that you can or are willing to do. So you have acknowledged that financial piece. And you have acknowledged that this is taking a toll on you emotionally and health-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And that this is something that you need to do for your family for the future.
Right.
Because at some point in time is you're no longer doing stuff for you, it's actually doing stuff for the future.
Right.
So it's like, okay, you've had that acknowledgement, right? So you're no longer avoiding that because anything that you avoid is going to, you're just going to get closer and closer and closer to that brick wall, if you ask me. And then it's going to come to a point where you can't avoid it anymore.
Yeah.
So you've taken that first step to acknowledge it. And now you're trying to put some action behind it. So let's just say you have you know, financially, you are where you need to be. So now you have enough money, you have the sense of financial security, right? So now you're making more money that you don't really have to worry about the bills anymore. But now it's the lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Because now it's like, do you want to keep up with the Joneses and really wear your money or save your money?
Right.
Because that becomes the financial implication. Because you might be financially secure, you know, but it's just like some of those little habits. So if you want to keep up with the Joneses and wear your money, you might become emotionally unstable. Mm-hmm. Because it's gonna be like, now you realize, dang, I just spent, you know, so much on a pair of, let's just say, Cartier frames, but now I gotta eat this poor health choice.
Yep.
Because I decided to spend my money on that. So now I can't really prep my food. I can't really eat healthy. And now that's affecting me health-wise. And then it's just like, that's how quick something that may seem virtuous, it's really, really easy to kind of like lose that balance when we're talking about that mind, body, and money connection. Because just because you have more money, that doesn't mean that it comes with the blueprint on the lifestyle.
Yeah, that's real.
It's really just taking those mindfulness moments and be like, okay, does this fit the overall lifestyle that I want? Get your feedback and kind of like your impression on kind of like how something can become, you know, vicious to virtuous, and then how it can easily, you know, revert back or propel forward depending on the lifestyle and lifestyle decisions that we choose to make.
Right. Yeah. Like that's why I like the word. You gave some really just dope points. Like that's why I like the word stableness and balance. Because you have to kind of have an even keel in everything that you're doing. And when you have a solid foundation, that's like what you always are gonna fall on. So if my foundation is kind of really battered, or it's kind of just, you know, broken down with a whole bunch of different, with the environment that I grew up in, then when life starts to hit, you'll always shake. So even if you're trying to build something, you might have, I try to get an analogy of a house. You might have a beautiful kitchen, a beautiful bathroom, got all the shades and drapes up, but if it's all built on a bad foundation, it can still fall just like that. So it could be good health, but if your finances are awful, you can go right down. So, or if I might have some pretty good, mental health. I meditate. I might do this and that. But if I meditate to eat McDonald's every day, yeah, I will still go down and fall. So you want your foundation to be built on all of those things, whether it be the good finances or just financial stability, mental stability, physical stability, emotional stability. So those are those pillars that kind of keep that house together. So it doesn't matter how good now that house looks. You might not have all the money in the world, but it's stable. You might not be able to run a marathon, but I can give you a 5K. You know what I mean? I can't, I'm not a psychologist or a social worker, but I meditate, once every other day. So at least I'm calm when those tough situations hit. And I worked on my anger. I worked on my sadness. So I might not look the best as you would like me to be, but I'm still stable and I can still function and I can still build and become better. That's where you want to be. And that's kind of the goal. It's not an easy thing to do because you'll have to probably break down some of that foundation that you had and rebuild, because you start building as soon as you're born, and that comes from your environment. So you're going to have to break some things down and rebuild and just let that grow so you can have the next generation be able to do the same thing, and so on.
Yeah, now that was a good summary right there, because it really brought everything into perspective. When we're thinking about a total health cycle, it's not a one size fits all. It's not even a one size fits most. It's actually customizable. Whatever your personal preference is, those morals, those values that keeps you stable, because then that goes into the stable piece. It's like, hey, that will be your baseline, because choices do add up. But when you go into having that strong foundation, and that's a good point, there's going to be times where you're going to have to break down the system in our head to build a stronger foundation. That was definitely great. Again, Justin, go ahead and let us know where we can find you, all the upcoming initiatives that you have coming down the pipeline so people can be aware. And then everybody, we do this every Wednesday. So this Wednesday, we talked about if it's a virtuous or vicious total health cycle. And next week, we're going to be talking about know thyself. The powerful benefits of self-awareness. So go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I'm trying to be everywhere. So, I got the Pain and Power podcast that's available on all platforms. Also, I have a support group, Mental Health for Millennials. We try to do that about once a month, getting speakers on there to speak their truth, and really just give people just that normalizing help for others. And then continue to follow me, whether it be on social media through all of those platforms. I'm pretty much on all of them under Justin Banks. So we're going to keep this train rolling.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone. And I hope you guys have a great and wonderful Wednesday and week.